What is going on, everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as J-Monster, and thank you for joining me for another replay battle. Today I have a 2 versus 2 on 1212 AD, pitting the forces of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and her Slavic allies against the combined might of the Teutonic Order and the Holy Roman Empire. It is very bloody, and the ending is a little bit surprising. I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with it. But in any case, let's, without any further ado, let's jump right into the army compositions, and then we can get into the replay itself. I hope you guys enjoy it. The first armor we're going to look at today is the Duchy of Lithuania, and he's bringing a couple units of Baltic Spearmen arranged here on his left flank. He's also got 4 units of armored cavalry. These guys are pretty good. There are some trade-offs to bringing them or the tier 1 pick, the Boyars. These guys, I think, have a little bit of a higher melee attack value, and they are more numerous. The Boyars cost them about 50 more florins and have 30 less men in the unit. So it's a trade-off. These guys are quite good in melee, and obviously very good on the charge as well. Shock cavalry. He's also got a couple units of noble cavalry. These guys are tier 1 melee and heavy cavalry units that, despite their axes, they are not actually armor piercing. I think they only have about 5 armor piercing damage, which, as I understand, is at average or slightly below average, so don't expect them to be hacking down heavily armored knights very easily. But what they do bring to the table that makes them quite unique is that they have a clutch of javelins that they can throw before they get themselves stuck in combat, making them quite versatile. You can use them as a flanking force. In fact, I recommend that you do so, because they are a tier 1 unit. So if you're flanking a more heavy cavalry unit, make sure you get these guys on their flank, toss those javies, and then charge into the back of them for maximum effect. He's also bringing a couple units of noble swordsmen, which basically operate on the same kind of principle as their mounted counterparts. They've got javelins, but about average armor-piercing damage, and they can be used quite effectively as a flanking force. He's also bringing a couple units of armored spearmen. I think that the Duchy of Lithuania, you're going to see them undergo some pretty significant changes to their roster, because a lot of their units seem like placeholder units at this point. So you've got your armored spearmen, you've got your armored infantry, another tier 2 unit, which they're pretty good. Not the best heavy infantry by any means against more noble swordsmen. Some skirmishers, like a medium skirmishing unit. Very, very nice AP damage, though. I think they have about 80 missile damage total, about 50 of which is armor piercing. So very good, especially if you can get them on the flank. They will chew out heavily armored knights. He's also bringing a unit of the Lithuanian Grand Duke. This is the High Period Grand Duke, so he's quite powerful. Not 100% sure on his stats, I can't remember most of them, but I think he's got about average AP damage as well, and much higher armor and attack and defense values than some of the other lower tier cavalry units. We're also bringing some Ruthenian archers. As we know, the Ruthenians are a Slavic people from what is now modern-day Ukraine. He's also bringing some armored crossbows. Really nice AP damage in these guys, as you would expect from a crossbow unit, but they also have a quite low rate of fire and, as far as I can remember, quite bad missile block chance. So they are very vulnerable to counter missile fire. Wow, excuse me. Especially from archers with a higher rate of fire than they do. But yeah, that's basically it. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at his ally now. Standing tall beside the Duchy of Lithuania, we have Kievan Rus. The Kievan Rus were an amalgamation, essentially, of Eastern Slavic tribes active during the 9th and 13th century as their own kind of political body under the command of the Rurik dynasty. They've got some interesting kind of state creation myths, and they sound a little bit shady to me, so I'll pass them on to you guys. Prince Rurik was one of the Rus, who was essentially a Viking. The Vikings sailed down the Volga, conquered a lot of the tribes in the area, and kind of set themselves up as local kings. And Prince Rurik apparently was, quote-unquote, invited to come and rule over them, which sounds shady and folkloric to me. It sounds more like a story that was kind of passed around to legitimize the rule of the ruling caste in that particular area, but I will leave the conclusions up to you guys. In any case, they're bringing a couple of units, I believe 4 units of Boyar Sons. These guys are really good. They've got a lot of armor, a pretty decent rate of fire, and a decent missile block chance as well. They don't have great melee stats, but they do have the disciplined trait, which will allow them to ignore any morale shocks that come from losing a general. So they can rout, it's just a lot harder to make these guys run away, especially with the loss of a general, the penalty for which an Attila is very steep. But in any case, a boyar in feudal Kievan Rus society is the equivalent, I think, of like a duke. They're a very high-ranking member of the society, next only to the prince, who is essentially the king. So the prince is the king, boyars are dukes, etc., etc. So yes, very good unit, quite high rate of fire as well, so they're quite adept at what they do. Behind them, we've got some Rus heavy spear militia. They are a militia unit, and so they do not have the discipline trait and all that other good stuff that the Boyar sons do. But they are good against cavalry, as you'd expect from a spear militia unit. Pretty decent defense, although I think their morale is a little bit lower than you would want. Over here we have the Dvor. These guys are so good. They have similar stats, I believe, to the Boyar sons. They also have disciplines, but they've got a much higher rate of fire. So these guys are great for sniping other skirmish units, or for putting the hurt onto lightly armored infantry units, or infantry units that just really aren't expecting to get shot by missiles. Their first line of melee infantry consists of the dismounted Druzhina. These guys are... Druzhina, I believe, comes from the Slavic, or not Slavic, well, I guess it's kind of a Slavic word for friend. In Russian, I believe it's druk. So, yeah, they're the friends of the knyaz, who is basically the leader or the warlord. So they're his personal bodyguard, and apparently he's got a lot of friends because there's a very large line of them here. Besides them, we have the Suzdal infantry. These guys are tier 2, pretty decent in melee. I think they have only about average kind of armor piercing, so don't let the maces and axes that they have fool you. I think they've only got about 6 armor piercing, which is maybe a little bit above average. But the Suzdal infantry come from what is now the... it's like an administrative district in Russia inside the Vladimir Oblast. It was once a very, very important town, but it's since, I think, fallen a little bit on hard times. And by that I mean, at one point, Suzdal, which is it's currently a town. It was founded in like the 12th century. It actually had Moscow as one of its subservient kind of district areas. So it's kind of fallen from grace a little bit. It's a smaller town. I think today only about 10,000 people live there. But still, these guys obviously from that area. Behind them, we've got a unit of urban crossbow militia. They're a militia unit. It's easy to make them run away. They have very low block chance for missiles, so they can get sniped out very easily. And they also have a very low rate of fire, being a crossbow unit. That being said, if you can get them to work, maybe even on a flank or something like that, or supporting an infantry line sniping cavalry, they can do a lot of damage. Behind them, we have some more Suzdal infantry all the way down the line. Very nice tiered defense here on the part of Kievan Rus. And then we have some westernized infantry. They have very high attack values, pretty good morale. I think they've got about 35 morale. So it's about, yeah, it's like top kind of tier morale as you'd expect from a tier 3 unit. And yeah, they look quite good. We've got those like Pavi shields, like an early kind of Pavi shield, a little bit smaller, I think, than what we expect from the Pavi crossbows. But yeah, still very cool. And obviously they are an Eastern Orthodox people, because you can see the Supetaneum cross here, which is really cool. Actually, you know what? We're going to go into some of the stuff about that, because it's an interesting little bit of iconography that you've seen in a lot of Eastern Orthodox churches, especially in Russia. And yeah, so let's talk about that. So it's a variation on the patriarchal cross, which is like that double cross there. So that they usually have 3 bars on. So that first bar, I think, is usually inscribed with like the name of Jesus. It's like a little plate. So like INRI or INDB or INBI. INRI is, you'll excuse me here, I haven't studied Latin in a very long time, but I think it's Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judearum or something like that. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And the second bar here, or the third bar rather, it's kind of crooked, which sets this apart as a Russian Orthodox cross from the patriarchal cross. It's supposed to point to 2 different people who were crucified alongside Jesus. So you had one thief named Gestas, who is on Jesus's right side, I believe, and it's pointing downwards because he was an unrepentant thief. And then you have I think it's like Saint Destas or something like that, who was the repentant thief who later became a saint. And obviously the other side is pointing down, so Gestas didn't become a saint. He probably went somewhere a little bit nasty. But in any case, I digress. Just a cool little factoid there. But yeah, they've got a large number of westernized infantry, and behind them you got some Rus Guard Axemen, who have pretty good AP stats. I think they have about 10 AP damage, really nice morale as well, about 40 or so, which is, I think, elite level morale, so they won't break easy, and on the charge, obviously, they will serve you very well. Let's move on now to their cavalry components. We've got the Knyaz's Guard. I spoke earlier about this, the Knyaz being the local warlord who's going to be in charge of this particular army. And yeah, Eastern Orthodoxy, you can see, I believe that's the Virgin Mary there. And I'm not sure, I think maybe that's supposed to be Jesus because they have like the kind of saintly halo around them, so they're definitely a sanctified person, but it's hard to tell. It's a little bit low resolution. Over here we have some Northern Boyars. These guys are pretty decent shot cavalry. I can't remember the kind of pros and cons of bringing them. I know they have really nice morale and they're a little bit more expensive, and I think they have a higher melee attack value than some of the other cavalry picks for Kievan Rus, but I'm not 100% certain on that one. Oh, looks like we got some more infantry. Yeah, some more dismounted Druzhina and some Rus Spear Militia, so we're not missing too much there. Suzdal Spearmen and some more Northern Boyars. He's got another unit of Northern Boyars here, but where are they? Ah, yes, I don't even know if I'm saying this right. But I think it's like Vijaz or Vijaz, something like that. I tried to figure out exactly what these guys were about. The closest I could come to is that that Vijaz is basically a Russian spelling or pronunciation of, I think, a Bulgarian word which for basically a stock character in Eastern Slavic mythology. So they're basically the equivalent of like a knight errant, like a wandering knight or a warrior, or just a strong person in general. So that's the closest I could come to it. And of course they have these really cool dome helmets, which I'm slowly unraveling the mystery of one video at a time. From what I can tell, it's actually not necessarily an Eastern sort of style or variant, although there is some Iron Age depictions of helmets very similar to these ones, all the way back in the Kingdom of Van, or like Utraru or something like that, in the local language in like Syrian. So it goes back to like 800, 900 BC at I think the latest, definitely around that period. And you can see sort of variations of it a little bit later in Western Europe in like the 16th and 17th centuries with the Molion helms, which are like, when you think of a stereotypical kind of conquistador, they've got those almost lemon-shaped helms with those upward pointing crests on the front that go all the way around the helmet. Yeah, it's that sort of thing. So it seems to have kind of made the rounds of most of the places in Europe that worked with metal. Or most of the places in the world, rather, that worked with metal. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm slowly learning a little bit more about it, and I thought I would pass that on to you guys. But that's basically it. I have rambled on long enough about this army composition, so let's move on to the attacking Team Red, and yeah, we'll take a look at the Teutonic Order's army composition. Opposite Kievan Rus and the Duchy of Lithuania, we have the Teutonic Order and her allies. This is just a massive army. Look at it. It just stretches here from sea to shining sea. It's just this huge wall of infantry. Their first line consists of Spear Sergeants, High Period. These guys are pretty good. I think they're one of the better spear picks that you can take for the Teutonic Order. I don't know if they actually have a Tier 3 spear pick, but I'm not 100% on that. But they have pretty good melee and attack defense stats, but they fall a little bit short of the Suzdal infantry arrayed across the field from them. So I think what we might see is a very hard-pressed Teutonic spear line trying to hold out against some of the more powerful Slavic infantry units. Behind them, we have some real killing power. These are the Ritter Bruder from the late period. They have a little bit less health than the high and early period units, but they have better armor, and I think they also have a better charge as well. So it's a bit of a trade-off. I think their block chance is about average as well, for missiles, that is. Behind them, we have the hardened infantry corps of the Teutonic Order. We've got 4 units of men-at-arms. These are heavy polearm infantry. They've got really nice AP stats. I think they have about 10, which puts them well above average, making them very useful at smashing your way through enemy infantry formations. So this is going to be a really difficult thing for a lot of the more lightly armored and Tier 1 units across the field to deal with. These guys have a lot of armor as well, so they're not necessarily as weak to missile damage as you would expect, although the Dvor, I'm sure, will come into play in a big way alongside the Boyar sons that are trying to drive these guys back. Behind them, they have a final line of pikemen, and they're pikemen. They really don't have... They're pretty straightforward in their uses. You march them at the enemy and try not to get their formation broken. Over here, we've got a unit of Grandmaster's Guard. This is the general unit for the Teutonic Order. I don't really remember too much about these guys. They obviously have a pretty decent charge value, being a heavy cavalry unit armed with those massive lances, but I won't speculate too much. In front of them, you have some Prussian archers to the tune of about 4, I believe, units, and another unit of Ritterbruder over here. So it's it's a very vast formation here that the Teutonic Order have to defend. I'm not sure that they have the infantry killing power necessarily to do it. Their reserves are quite fearsome, but I don't know. They might end up relying on their allies here. This is the not the Western Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire. He's bringing some Imperial Rita. These are the high period Tier 2 heavy shock cavalry. He's also got some... here we are. Some écorcheurs footmen, which in French is like a skinner or like a flayer. So it's interesting to see that that French name here inside of a German-speaking army. But still, Tier 3 heavy infantry unit, really good. I've seen them in some of the other battles. They do a lot of work. In front of them, we have some Tier 3 bowmen. These are the Free Company longbowmen. Don't know too much about these guys, although from what I can tell, longbow units tend to have about 10 to 12, I think, AP damage, making them not bad at using against heavy infantry units in formation. Although you definitely want to watch out for certain units in like a testudo formation, because you'll just end up wasting your ammunition. Behind the écorcheurs footmen, we've got... Oh, I love this. So let me just make a note here about this tier defense. Really, really nice. Not quite so thin and flimsy looking as the Teutonic Order's line. They've got a lot of reserves and a lot of decent infantry to back them up. He's got a couple units here of the high period Aussoldner. I don't really know too much about these guys, but it sounds like household, sort of. So they may be like a household guard, similar to like the Huskarls in England and that sort of thing. Behind them, we've got some Landsknechte. These are medium pike infantry. Obviously, they're pikes, so they're pretty straightforward in their usage, although a little bit thin, possibly very easy to break this line, but I don't know. We'll see. Behind them, we've got some dismounted Rita, heavy polearm infantry, armed with pole axes, making them deadly in close combat for armored infantry. Probably, I would guess, about 10 AP, something around there. You really need that to make these specialized units kind of perform well in their roles. Behind them, we have Emperor Hilschild, his bodyguard, who we just see everywhere. Whenever you see the Holy Roman Empire, just assume that Emperor Hilschild is going to be there, because that seems to be the case. Again, with those fancy Holy Roman Empire uniforms, rather, absolutely love them, although I find those crests a little bit ridiculous. But in any case, moving on now, we've got some Tier 1 Imperial Rita, so possibly a little bit of a budget pick. Although from what I've seen, the trend seems to be that the early and late period tend to have a little bit more health, so maybe they're good as a throwaway unit for holding down a line for an extended period of time, or for soaking up arrow fire. Behind them, he's got some more Imperial Rita, or to the side of them, rather, some more Imperial Rita, and over on his flanks, he's got some Burgmannen. These are early period spearmen, medium spear infantry. I think they have a decent block chance, although their morale might be a little bit lower, being a Tier 1 unit. He's also got some more écorcheurs footmen here on his front line. So that basically does it for the army compositions. That took a while, much longer. The more information I learned, the longer the army compositions tend to take, because I'd like to pass that information on to you guys, obviously. But in any case, let's jump right into the replay, and I hope you guys enjoy it. You can see a skirmish fight beginning to materialize here between Kievan Rus and the Teutonic Order. Looks like the Teutonic Order has fallen back their Prussian archers behind their lines. The Boyar sons being very, very aggressive, getting themselves very much in harm's way. You can see volleys coming in and their block chance serving them very well. Not very many casualties, one or two here and there, but ultimately these Boyar sons are very good at holding a line against other archer units. Prussians have now moved in with another 3 units of their Prussian archers, the Tier 2 archers, looking to put a lot of pressure on the flank there with those Boyar sons, possibly looking to whittle them down with a sustained bow fire from 3 units, which is a good idea. The Boyar sons, as I said, can stand up to missiles quite well, but a sustained volley fire like that is going to be really difficult for any unit to stand up to for a long period of time. Sysdal infantry now moving forward, looking to kind of bully those Prussian archers out of position, using just their mere presence, I suppose, as a threat. Elsewhere, you can see the skirmish fight beginning to unwind between the Holy Roman Empire and the Duchy of Lithuania. Duchy of Lithuania moving forward with their infantry, in fact, looking to be very aggressive, trying to keep some of their archers out of harm's way. I think the plan here is to put these guys in a shielded formation, one that is at least mobile, and soak up some of the arrow fire from the incoming Free Company bowmen, and use that to provide a screen to get their armored crossbowmen and archers into position. So with a little bit of movement over here on the cavalry side, I think maybe the Vityas are feeling a little bit hungry There's a couple units here of these Prussian archers that may be getting themselves into position to open fire on the Vityaz, and indeed they are, punishing this little mistake here, I think, by the Kievan Rus player, getting his cavalry a little bit too close to the Prussian lines, and it doesn't seem like he realizes exactly what's happening here with his Vityaz, but he is going to respond in kind with his Boyar Son, so maybe he does realize, and he's trying to get them into position so that they can begin to open fire on this very blobbed up formation of Prussian archers. Now would be a good time to fall back, and indeed that is what the Teutonic player is going to do, being very cautious, very deliberate, just kind of trying to poke holes in the enemy formation, looking for a weakness or possibly looking to create one and exploit it. Over here we can see the main infantry body of Lithuania beginning to move forward. This is a very dangerous proposition. There are some sexy, very deadly tier 3 infantry just staring at them, waiting, hungry for battle. So that's I think that's going to be a really uphill, almost uneven fight in favor of the Holy Roman Empire. But we'll see. Maybe Lithuania has something up their sleeves. Over here, the infantry slowly inching forward. These Teutonic spear sergeants getting ready to receive a charge from the enemy side. This is going to be, I think, really decisive for the Duchy of Lithuania and her ally, the forces of Kievan Rus. If they can break through this thin spear line, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, here to exploit this very thin, wide front that the Teutonic Order has presented to them. If they can punch through here and begin to roll up lines on either side and get in with their cavalry through that gap into the archers, then they can do a lot of damage and crush the Teutonic Order. But of course, they still have to reckon with the reserves. Although the reserves from the Teutonic Order are quite far away from the front at this point, it's going to be difficult, I think, to have them rapidly respond to any developments here. But I suppose the spearmen will hang out for a little while, so they do have a little bit of wiggle room in that regard. Well, you see the Duchy of Lithuania just fearlessly marching forward. Not too many casualties really have been taken by the armored spearmen and the armored infantry. I think mostly the Holy Roman Empire is starting to focus on the archers, so the Ruthenian archers and the crossbows. I think that would be a really easy fight for those Free Company longbowmen. They are tier 3, and they look fairly well armored. I don't know if that's, maybe it's not the best indication, but they seem to be able to stand up to volley fire quite well. Oh, look at this. Let's slow down just a little bit here and enjoy some of the action. The Duchy of Lithuania moving forward to engage the Eikoshofootmen, and apparently not doing too bad for themselves. It's saying that it's even right now. They have equal numbers, but the Eikoshofootmen are a tier above them. The forces of the Holy Roman Empire now mobilizing their reserves, looking to exploit some of the gaps in the line here that you see have been created by the forces of Lithuania. If they can scoot a pikeman unit through here and begin to flank these armored spearmen and armored infantry as they move in, or even better, moving through with one of their Imperial Rita, they can cause a lot of damage and a lot of chaos in the back of Lithuania's line. Elsewhere, we can see the engagement getting underway. Some of these Ruthenians, or these Baltic spearmen, kind of stopping short, and that's honestly a good idea. These Eikoshofootmen will cut them to pieces. But let's move on now to Kievan Rus' side of things and see how they're faring against the spear wall. These tier 1 sergeants, I think, are going to get themselves bested by the Druzhina. The Druzhina are definitely more meant in general for this kind of combat, whereas spearmen in general seem to be more for holding the line and for taking on cavalry and scaring cavalry. So this is, I think, going to be an uneven fight in favor of Kievan Rus, and you can see them really doing work on these spear sergeants. They've cut down almost 50 of them at this point, which is a really big loss, and only really lost one in return. The Suzdal infantry doing a great job of fighting for their prince. Elsewhere, though, a lot of the line has been left kind of unengaged, which means that they're not going to be able to break through. They're not going to be able to threaten that cavalry or to get in here and silence these archers. They're going to have to really rely on their dismounted boyar sons, which they're moving in now en masse. You can see the Devor in there as well, probably looking to weaken the range contingents here before they move in with their infantry, or even just delaying this engagement for as long as possible, because the Teutonic Order still has to keep their forces in place to deal with those with that menace. Looks like Kievan Rus has managed to break through, routing one of the units of spear sergeants, but the Ritter Brood are going to respond in kind, forcing forcing the hands of Kevin Roos. They're now bringing in another unit of it appears Suzdal infantry to beat back these late period Ritterbrüder, but that's not going to be an easy fight. They really need to get some spears in there or some cavalry or find a way to surround these guys, which I think they may be able to do if they break through these spear sergeants. These guys are shaken already and losing decisively, so we could see a surround coming in very, very shortly, but that will expose their flank to these Ritterbrüder, so I don't know if Kevin Roos is going to go for it. I think what they want to do instead is just pelt these guys with arrows, try and get them out of position so that they can effect a surround and spare their infantry units the brunt of a heavy cavalry charge. Over here, though, things not looking great for Lithuania. They are being beaten back quite soundly by the Ekorshel footmen. You can see 66 still remaining in that unit now routing off the battlefield. They aren't shattered, though, so they could reform later, but these Ekorshel footmen looking pretty worse for wear as well. Still at about half strength, though, after beating back those units, so that's a big loss for the Lithuanians. I don't know if they have the infantry really to punch through this tiered defense by the Roman Empire, or the Holy Roman Empire. It's really going to be an uphill struggle. Over here we got some more breaking thanks to a timely charge by some of the Imperial Ritter. These are just the tier 1 units, so really good as a rapid response unit like this. They can do a lot of damage and you don't lose too much by losing one of your tier 1 units of cavalry. Over on this end, the Lithuanians are just being beaten back everywhere. These Ekorshel footmen really just putting the hurt onto these noble swordsmen and these Baltic spearmen as well. These Baltic spearmen really don't have a chance in hell of getting the best of those Ekorshel footmen. Really, not even the noble swordsmen with their javelins. It seems that they've thrown a few of them can really do much to punch through that heavy infantry line. And we have this cavalry kind of just holding its ground, not wanting to get in there amongst those Bogmannen. Tier 2, though they are, and quite decent on the charge, these guys are spears and they are in formation, so that will be a very tough fight from the front for a cavalry unit. Over here, though, looks like we see a little bit of breaking on the part of the Kievan Rus side. These Suzdal infantry now retreating in the face of, yes, the men-at-arms now backing up some tier 3 cavalry. This is very, very deadly combination, and it appears to me that the Teutonic Order is mobilizing their reserves very, very well and very, very prudently. You can see there's a breakthrough here. They've mobilized some of their pikemen alongside their halberdmen as well to push back that breakthrough, really giving the Suzdal infantry a run for their money. They're now wavering. We could see them run here, and they're going to be trapped behind enemy lines, so we could get some shattering at this early period in the battle, which would be very unfortunate. Elsewhere, though, the spear line, as I thought it would, is beginning to crumble a little bit, especially under the weight of those Suzdal infantry and those Suzdal spearmen. Still engaged over here on the far red team right flank. Not really looking like they have any interest in kind of pushing through here. Kievan Rus just kind of looking to skirmish down some of these forces and maybe even take down some of these Ritterbrüder as well, which would be a big bonus for them because they're kind of just sitting here right now. So they are definitely presenting a open target, but unfortunately there's just not enough skirmishers to go around. You can see some of the Boyar sons and the Devor here as well, trying to take down those Prussian archers, doing an admirable job of it. This unit here now down to about half strength, but there's just so many of them, and their infantry is in such a bad spot right now, it seems, that I don't know how long they're going to be able to hold that line. Elsewhere, though, it's utter chaos back here in the Lithuanian army. You can see some of the Imperial Ritter have now broken through, beginning to get into the skirmishers, which is really not what you want. These melee skirmishers already shaken, possibly looking to run off the battlefield. 108 armored spearmen running from their lives, fleeing in the face of those Landsknechte. Really unfortunate, though they aren't shattered, so we could see them reform, and I think we probably will with that many men left in the unit, and the Lithuanian general still here looking over his troops. Then we'll probably see them reform. Over here we've got a unit of Imperial Ritsa. This is the tier 1 unit that helped effect a breakthrough here on the Lithuanian lines. Really, really isolated. They kind of just went for it against these armored crossbowmen, but they're now very isolated, allowing them to be easily surrounded by the noble cavalry, and I think there's some of the armored cavalry in there as well. Elsewhere, though, the infantry fight is just a massacre. These Ekorshel footmen really, really just proving too much, I think, for the tier 1 and tier 2 Lithuanian infantry force. I don't think they're going to be able to come back from this. Ekorshel footmen just too strong, and I've just done so much damage to the infantry force right now that these are almost casualties that you cannot recover from at this very early phase of the battle. There's just so much routing going on here too. Some more skirmishers falling back alongside those armored spearmen, and another unit of skirmishers beginning to rout. So things looking really, really bad for the Lithuanians over here. And it looks like Kievan Rus is going to rush to their aid with some of their northern boyars. sending in one of their cavalry units, hoping to drive back some of the Holy Roman Empire's cavalry. You can see more Imperial Ritter now running through those lines, still defended in the rear by those Landsknechte. So any gains that they make can be consolidated by the Holy Roman Empire. They've still got a lot of infantry left to go around. And they haven't even mobilized some of their best reserves either. They got some dismounted Ritter here, and of course Emperor Heerschild in the back overseeing the whole shebang. Big charge going in here from the Northern Boyars into the Imperial Ritter. They're both Tier 2 heavy shock cavalry. Not 100% sure on their stats, but I think this is going to be a fairly even fight here. So this is basically going to check the movement of the Kievan Rus cavalry coming into the aid of their ally. They can see a lot of routing here. Some of the Imperial Ritter now being driven back, getting themselves isolated behind enemy lines, turning out not to be the best idea for those cavalry units. So a lot of the Holy Roman Empire cavalry has been beaten back, but there is still that infantry force to deal with. What do you even do to them? Although, strangely enough, we've got a unit of Ecoshel footmen here beginning to rout off the battlefield. That's very surprising. They've still got 66 left in there, so it's a fair amount of units still left inside. And they're running from the battlefield. That's quite surprising. Looks like the armor infantry are the ones that are seeing them off. But they're going to be allowed to reform here by this wall of pikes being erected by the Landsknechte. So the Holy Roman Empire is still very much in command of the infantry fight, in my opinion. Moving back over here, we have the reserves from the Teutonic Order. It looks like we got some routing here. Some of the men-at-arms down to half strength, thinking about running away. This is surprising. The Suzdal infantry really just putting the hurt on these guys. Not the Holy Roman Empire. The Teutonic Order really struggling to drive back this push from the Kievan Rus. Although there is a little bit of possible routing here, but this is the Spear Militia, so I guess that's kind of to be expected. Dismounted Druzhina doing their best to hold the line against some pikemen now moving into engage them. They are in the midst of a celebration and getting skewered by this pike wall. Although this is a little bit strange. They're kind of walking through the unit, which I think is going to be a big problem for this pike unit. They rely heavily on their formation and keeping enemies pinned in place, and they are now just getting flanked. And you can see a lot of them beginning to go down. So let's speed up just a little bit here. Oh, those poor pikemen. This is not good. They are losing decisively. There is still, I think, some reserves yet to go around, some reforming happening behind the Teutonic Order's line, but they are not doing as well as we thought they would be just a little bit earlier in the battle. Though there is some shattering here. Possibly one of the general units has gone down. That is very unfortunate. 105 Suzdal infantry now running off of the battlefield, not to return, leaving their brothers behind, and following those militia spearmen off the field. So it's a bit of a mixed bag here, but I think the battle is really starting to turn around in favor of the Teutonic Order. They're just driving back Kievan Rus in all kinds of places. Look at this, 139. Yes, the Kievan Rus general is in fact dead, and that is going to cause a lot of panic in their ranks. These Westernized infantry, 127, already thinking about routing, so healthy, and only and actually not doing too bad in that combat as well. But there's just so many Teutonic Order knights here that are really starting to give them a little bit of a scare, I think. And we can see did I see the Rus Guard now charging into battle? Yes, I did. Rus Guard Axemen looking to hold down this line, driving back the heavy polearm infantry. A really nice back and forth here on the side of the Teutonic Order and Kievan Rus. We're going to come back to that now in just a moment. It looks like things still kind of hanging in the balance here for Lithuania. They're really struggling to deal with these Ecoshel footmen, even here on this side, and luckily the Northern Boyars are here to give them a little bit of assistance, but they're kind of not moving right now. I think Kievan Rus really has his attention elsewhere, trying to deal with the mass routing and shattering on his end of the field. We can see some of these units, I think, have reformed here. We've got a couple units of noble swordsmen that were routing off the battlefield earlier and staring down these Ecoshel footmen. I know they don't want to get in there. They don't want to get back into that fight. They're now out of javelins, though, so they're going to have to do something because the Holy Roman Empire is now moving in with some of their Bloodmagpie, looking to overlap this tiny infantry formation. These guys have very wisely been held in reserve, and apparently that they also have missiles as well. So maybe they throw their spears or something. I don't know, but we're gonna find out right here. Let's see what they do to these poor wavering Baltic spearmen. No, nothing. No, they're just moving in there. They're gonna take these guys on and rout them, I think, very quickly. These outnumbered and demoralized Baltic spearmen not gonna be able to stand up to those Bloodmagpie for very long. More routing over here. Looks like we've got some armored spearmen. Broken but not shattered. 33 left in the unit. These guys still have their general. They still have courage to fight. but it looks like the Holy Roman Empire is really running roughshod all over them. You can see another unit of their heavy cavalry, the Ritterbrüder, having punched through the line and getting into some of the crossbows. And if these guys are not careful, they're going to shatter. A lot of them have been killed and they're now routing, but they still may come back from the battlefield. The Lithuanians do have an opportunity here. They could fire some of those very powerful javelins. That 50 AP damage would do a lot to help out these northern boyars drive back the Ritterbrüder. Elsewhere, though, it just seems like a constant back and forth, routing here and there, units fleeing, reforming, and coming back to the fray. Still looking fairly even to my eye between Kievan Rus and the Teutonic Empire. Their powerful reserves, very much the hammer of their army, has been reduced quite heavily. You can see 65 out of 160 left in this pikeman unit, and very few left in these men-at-arms who are thinking about wavering. This could be a shatter right here. There's enough of them dead. I think enough of the army being beaten as well that we could see a mass rout and a mass shatter between these two units. Another unit of men-at-arms moving in to try and fill the gap that is now being left by those Ritterbrüder who are being driven back. Kievan Rus just seems to be completely indomitable, not stopping for anything, cutting their way through the Tier 3 infantry and looking, I think, to get into those Prussian archers. If they can shut these guys down, that is going to go a long way to helping them out. Also, we got some shattering here. I think maybe the Teutonic general has died. A lot of shattering. These dismounted Dragina just took out like 3 units all by themselves. That is crazy. These pikemen now moving in to try and contain this thrust from Kievan Rus. But I think the battle has basically been won here. The Teutonic Order has largely been wiped out. A ton of shattering over here. Although, luckily for their side, the Holy Roman Empire is holding on, and they're really sticking at, I think, to the combined forces of Kievan Rus and the Duchy of Lithuania. We've got a unit of heavy Rus spearmen here. These are the heavy spear militia trying to hold down the flank alongside some of the Lithuanians, but looks like there's some dismounted Rita in there. Emperor's Hair Shield on the flank could get a nice charge in there, but it looks like the noble swordsmen not going to give him the opportunity, charging into battle, throwing their spears and doing a lot of damage to that general's bodyguard. If he's not careful, if he loses his general here, that is game over. His army will flee and shatter. Over here, it looks like the dismounted Rita really driving these Rus spearmen back. There is still a chance for the Holy Roman Empire to pull this back, but they have to deal with some of these skirmish units. They don't want to advance on Kievan Rus, on the victorious Kievan Rus, and leave these units in their rear. That would be, I think, a very grave mistake. So he's just trying to reform his lines, trying to decide what exactly he's going to do to get himself out of this hole. He does have an opportunity, though. If he can surround some of these units, you can see a lot of them are wavering right now. Even though they are winning against the halberdmen, if they can surround these guys, possibly with a cavalry unit or with these Eikosho footmen, which he is moving in right now, then he will be able to break these guys. The Lithuanians, I think, see the danger that they are in with that overcommitment of their infantry there against that one halberd unit. Now trying to delay that engagement, delay the surrounds, and try and save what remains of their infantry. You can see a lot of routing going on. So let's go ahead and let's slow it down. And let's enjoy some of the action. These dismounted Dragina and the Lithuanian allies, I think, are going to really struggle against these halberdmen. These dismounted Rita just doing work against these guys. You can see these guys now shaken and being beaten back quite heavily in melee. Over here, we got some Eikosho footmen moving in to engage the noble swords. That's going to be an easy fight for those Eikosho footmen. You can see them just rushing right past, getting a little bit too eager, rushing into a very healthy unit. In fact, full strength of westernized infantry. And then in behind them on the side of the Holy Roman Empire, you can see more and more reforming going on. I think he's confident in the engagement over here in beating back the Lithuanian cavalry and their infantry, and is now beginning to move on the rest of the Kievan Rus force with the main body of the forces that remains of him. Yeah, there's a lot of routing here. More noble swordsmen being driven back. Lithuania just trying, I think, to delay the advance of the Holy Roman Empire long enough for Kievan Rus to wheel around, get himself into formation, and begin to drive back the Holy Roman Empire. Let's go ahead and move it on to normal speed now. You can see some skirmishers moving in. The Boyar Sons actually looking pretty healthy. A reasonable amount of missiles left Over here with some more Boyar Sons, a little bit worse for wear though, down to 50, but there's still a very healthy skirmish force on the part of the Kievan Rus. He's got his Devor still left over. These guys are rapid fire with really nice defensive stats. With the amount of ammo they have left, they can do a ton of damage to, for example, this pikeman unit. That's going to be a big deal, I think, in punching a hole in the Holy Roman Empire's forces. Well, I hear some rallying. Over here at these Imperial Ritza just being surrounded and actually beaten in combat by crossbows. It's very unfortunate to see. We have these Bogmanen have now broken through those Baltic Spearmen over there and looking to get in and silence these armored crossbows. These Imperial Rit are now coming back, trying to get into the back of these armored crossbows and pin them down long enough for the infantry to get in there, but the infantry has now switched targets, moving on to try and hunt down these armored crossbowmen. So we got a charge here from some of the armored cavalry looking to get into the rear of these Bogmanen. They are really in a bad position. They can beat the armored cavalry, I think, given the numbers left to them, but they're going to have to deal with these crossbows now, firing into their rear and into their flank. Let's go ahead and let's slow it down just a little bit. Back here on the front, oh man, these poor halberdiers, these dismounted Ritza, really beginning to be driven back by the dismounted Druzhina. The Kievan Rus faction and the Duchy of Lithuania have done a great job here at turning what seemed like a certain defeat into quite a resounding victory, although the worst, I think, is yet to come. There's still a lot of Holy Roman Empire soldiers left here. You can see a fight between the Rusgard Axemen and the Eagleshield Maybe this will be a little bit more even. These guys have a lot of AP, so they might be able to hack down these heavily armored Tier 3 footmen, but I suppose only time will tell. These guys are losing decisively, really struggling to fight these Eagleshield footmen who are just doing work here, driving back one of the most elite units still left to Kievan Rus. These Eagleshield footmen, I think, are going to be potentially the anvil upon which the Kievan Rus and remaining Lithuanian forces break upon. Looks like they might be trying to rout. Oh yeah, they're routing right through the Eagleshield footmen. That is just deadly, and they are now shattered. That is all we're going to see from the Rusgard. Very unfortunate. Some Druzhina now moving in to take their place and try and whittle down these Eagleshield footmen who have just, I think they've actually earned a chevron or two in this battle, just from killing a whole bunch of lower tier infantry. It's like a bit of a breakthrough here. Some of the Susdal Spearmen managing to get into the skirmish line, but honestly, this is a mistake. These guys are now going to turn around and just charge into the rear of these guys while they are being pummeled with arrows from the Free Company longbowmen in the back. This poor Susdal Spearman unit really surrounded, really going to suffer heavily. There's actually some Eagleshield footmen in there as well, so this is not the ideal engagement, I think, for these Susdal Spearmen. Although strangely enough, they managed to shatter those Eagleshield footmen. I think possibly at this point the Holy Roman Empire has lost their general, so that could be the decisive factor. Oh man, these poor Bogmanen really exposed here, fighting some westernized infantry, which is not an easy fight for them to begin with, being a Tier 1 spear unit against a Tier 3 sword and board unit. And at the same time, they are being pummeled from the rear by constant missile fire on the part of the Lithuanian crossbows and some of the Boyar Sons as well. The Holy Roman Empire really being driven back at this point. I think that it's fair to say that defeat is nearly certain for these guys. They still have the Emperor's Heerschild bodyguard, so maybe their general hasn't been lost after all. But really, the second this guy dies, this entire force is going to fall apart. But he may be dead. I don't know. There's not really custom models for the generals that I can see, so it's hard to tell at a glance. But with half the bodyguard, maybe it's safe to assume that the general has not yet fallen. We'll see this Emperor's Heerschild bodyguard moving around, looking to get possibly a flank charge here into the rear of those dismounted Druzhina. Although he realizes, oh man, look at that destruction. Oh, I'm stuttering a little bit there. That's like 20, almost 20 of that heavy cavalry unit falling. They are now shattered and fleeing off the battlefield. Oh, that is a disaster for the Holy Roman Empire, and I think it's safe to say at this point that they have definitely lost the battle. You can see a lot of their forces now fleeing off the battlefield. These Eagleshield footmen doing as well as they can, but they're just being pummeled by the Boyar Sons, and they're now exposed on their flank to constant missile fire. Oh, that's so unfortunate. We're going to go ahead and we're going to speed it up just a little bit. You can see the Susdal Spearmen in the back fighting against some Free Company longbows. Longbows not doing too bad. I think the Susdal Spearmen are probably quite shaken and quite demoralized at this point. But elsewhere, Eagleshield footmen being driven back. I think they are now shattered. Yep, and they're the... Oh, no, that's not them. That's not them, but they're probably gone as well. I think we can see them in the back there. Yeah, the agricultural footmen now fleeing off the battlefield, shattered. And that is going to be all she wrote for the Teutonic Order and the Holy Roman Empire allies. One final glorious charge here. Let's slow it down and really enjoy this. Free Company longbows, not going to give up so easily. These Tier 3 units, I think, have the morale to stick around for a little while. And because they haven't routed yet, I think it's possible they may also have the disciplined trait as well, meaning that the loss of their general isn't as much of a big deal for them as it is for other units. See them just hacking down here. Westernized infantry. The westernized infantry are going to get the better of this engagement. The longbows are not nearly as good in combat as a dedicated melee unit, but they're going to go for it nonetheless. Looks like they managed to shatter a unit of Druzida, which is very surprising. They're now going to pursue them off the field. Charge here, I think, from the Lithuanian Grand Duke, who has been held in reserve for a very long time, still very healthy, is going to be enough to send these Free Company longbowmen fleeing off the battlefield. This is basically the final engagement right here. And those Free Company longbowmen, one of the units now shattering, fleeing off the battlefield, and the other being beaten back, losing quite decisively to these westernized infantry. Oh man, it's so unfortunate. I really thought that the Teutonic Order and the Holy Roman Empire had this for a while, but Lithuania and Kievan Rus have really managed to pull it back from the brink. I'm going to fast forward it just a little bit here, getting down to the last couple minutes of the battle. Everything that remains of the Holy Roman Empire just making this last stand here in amongst the ruins of their army and that of their allies. Oh, what is this? Oh my goodness, the Teutonic Order is still here. They have rallied and they have now come back to try and flank the Kievan Rus forces. This could be a game changer. If they start to shatter, then that's going to be a very big deal. They could basically annihilate a significant portion of Kievan Rus' strength here if they manage to get into the rear. And they've still got some archers, still got some Prussian archers who are laying down fire. Oh my goodness, trying to assassinate the Lithuanian Grand Duke and cause a ton of shattering. Oh, this is unexpected. I thought that they were done and just gone from the battlefield, but no, they are back, taking on the Devor now in close combat. Not an even fight for the Prussian archers at all, but still a very brave showing by these archers. Got some spear sergeants now forming up to try and take on the westernized infantry. That's not going to be an easy fight for them. They're now in square formation, giving them a nice melee defense advantage over the westernized infantry, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. Oh, we got some shattering over here. Some of these spear sergeants. No, this final glorious charge by the Teutonic Order being beaten back by some dismounted boyar sons. I think there's some Devor in there as well. Oh, that's very unfortunate. Still, a great try, great effort on the part of the Teutonic Order. Let's take a look now at some of the casualties. A fantastic battle, really back and forth. See here, bloodmagpie commanding the Lithuanians, not doing too badly. Some of his armored infantry did really well. I mean, they were kind of tier 2 placeholder infantry units, so I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of them, but like 200, 128, 238, very good. Definitely killed more than the cost it takes to bring them. Noble swordsmen not doing all that great, but we did see them snipe the Holy Roman Empire's general, do a lot of damage to it. I think take down like half the unit with a nicely timed javelin volley, so they definitely were a worthy pick for the force overall. Ruthenian archers doing all right. Armored crossbowmen, some of them getting a ton of kills, others not doing as well, but still respectable amount of kills there, 67 and 71 respectively. Got some mercenary Mazovian cavalry. Looks like we managed to miss a couple of the cavalry units. These guys are a high period unit. I don't really know too much about their stats, but it seems like at least one of them did very, very poorly, getting one kill. These guys did not bad, though. Armored cavalry really doing their best. I think this one might have got shut down by some of the more powerful late period Ritterbruder, which is not an easy fight for those tier 2 armored cavalry, but still, they did their best. Teutonic Order doing pretty well there with some of their reserve units, although not as well as I would have thought they would do. Those tier 3 units really fighting a lot of like tier 1 and tier 2 spear units, so I would have expected a little bit more from them. But it just seems like they really, really struggled against some of the Suzdal infantry, who apparently are really good. I did not expect them to come out on top in the engagement, but they really put the hurt onto the heavily armored and very elite reserves for the Teutonic Order. Their pikemen did alright from the front. I think one of them got really badly flanked. We saw that there. He kind of just like walked through an infantry unit instead of stopping and poking them to death. So very unfortunate for them. Spear sergeants just getting themselves absolutely worked over. Got some high period ones here and some lower tier spear sergeants as well. The higher tier units did a little bit better, but overall it was a really tough fight for them. The Prussian archers, though, just reaping a terrible toll at the expense of Kievan Rus. I think they took down a lot of those boyar sons and a lot of some of the more lightly armored units as well. All of those Ritterbrüder Cav really amounted to a fair amount of damage on the not the Lithuanians, the Kievan Rus. It's hard to switch between all the factions. Some of them getting 117 kills, 69 here, but I think some of the units got themselves a little bit too isolated, being too eager to run down some lightly armored skirmishers, and ended up being isolated well behind enemy lines and surrounded and destroyed. Moving on now, we have the armies of Kievan Rus. His poor Knyaz's guard. I don't even know what happened to them. I didn't see it, but it looks like they might have just got sniped by missiles or something, because they got no kills, or they got shut down by a heavy cavalry unit. I don't know. Rus Heavy Spear Militia, they were good for just kind of being a distraction, not really getting a lot of kills. 4 and 3 is a little bit pitiful. The lightly armored Spear Militia apparently doing better than both of them combined. Suzdal Spearmen not doing bad at all. Oh man, those Druzhina just did work. A lot of kills there. Suzdal Infantry as well. They seemed like these two units seemed really key to the Kievan Rus strategy of just kind of punching through that lightly armored spear line and yeah, just beginning to rout those units, causing the destruction of the Teutonic force. Rus-Guard Axemen, 14 kills, not so great, but these guys got 121, not bad at all. Westernized Infantry, oh my goodness! 496 kills, that is gigantic. Well done. Boyar sons reaping a terrible toll amongst the ranks of those Prussian archers. They definitely gave better than they got in that engagement, but that is to be expected from these very elite archer units. The Devor doing, I think, best of all, really nice use of their archers. Urban Crossbow Militia really paying for themselves, 191, very impressive. Northern Boyars not doing so great. They were useful for supporting his Lithuanian ally when he needed the help. The Vitjaz, or I think it's Vitjaz or Vitjaz, something like that, did pretty well, except for this one, 19. That's a little bit pitiful, but I think these guys were fighting heavy cavalry, so 69, fairly respectable. Holy Roman Empire, their Burgmannen actually did pretty well. I was impressed with that flanking movement. He really exploited, I think, the very easily surrounded formation from the Lithuanian duchy. His Landsknechte doing a great job at providing basically cover for some of his units to flee behind and then reform and come back to the fight. And this one right here getting 250 kills. That is beautiful. Really paid for itself right there. Dismounted Ritza doing really well. We saw the last stand of one of those units. I think it was this one right here, getting a lot of kills on some of the Tier 1, Tier 2 units for the Slavic factions. The Ausoldna doing pretty well. 107, very respectable for our line infantry. Look at these Eagle footmen. They just did so much work. Nobody getting less than 110 kills. That is so impressive. Definitely a worthy pick for your armies moving forward. Moving on now to the Free Company Longbowmen, they did work as well. All of the archers really were really well placed in this battle, and they had the time that they needed and the angles that they needed to really inflict heavy casualties on the opposite side. So really nicely done to everybody involved in that regard. A couple units here of early period Imperial Ritza. I think this is the one that managed to break through, so that was a really nice use of them. Not sure what happened to these guys, though. I think they might have gotten themselves isolated somewhere, possibly trying to run down some archers and stop the archer forces, which we saw did really well in this from being a complete pain in the butt. The rest of his cavalry did really well, except for this one unit right here, which just got themselves utterly destroyed, which is very, very unfortunate to see. But yeah, that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed. Coming up next, I'm not sure what's going to be coming up next. It's probably going to be a mix of replays and Let's Play episodes. But I recommend that you guys go and check out the official Third Age Reforged channel right now, because they have just uploaded another one of my replays on a brand new community-made map, which is really cool, and it's just chaotic and bloody and just a glorious mess. But yeah, that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you later. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye!